G'day viewers, in this video I'm going to show you how to install front wheel bearings on my Toyota Aristo JZS161. The parts I'm going to need are dust caps, skid control rotors, seals, nuts, circlips, and of course the front wheel bearings themselves. So the first thing we've got to do is jack up the car and take the wheel off. I'm using my scissor jack and trolley jack to support it. Off comes the wheel. First thing to come off is the brake caliper. I'm going to support the brake caliper by using that contained there. 17mm socket, a 1/2 inch ratchet, and 2 bolts to take out supporting the caliper there at the back. Once that's off, we can then take brake rotor off as well. Now we have to remove this nut that holds in the top ball joint to the arm. We're going to use the rattle gun to do that. The trick here is to take the nut, or to loosen the nut but leave the nut on there, so it makes it easier to release the ball joint out of the arm. So with a hammer, just tap the bottom all around there. Now you can actually tap the nut, but you've got to be very careful not to damage the nut or damage the bottom thread of that ball joint. Otherwise you're in all sorts of trouble. And pop, there it goes. So we're just going to leave the nut on there for the moment. The next thing we're going to do is take the 2 bolts in the lower ball joint. On mine it's a 10mm hex in hex. Take those out. I've got RCA adapters there to accommodate my Supra calipers. Now we take a 10mm socket and take out the ABS sensor. You've got to be very, very careful that you don't damage the ABS sensor, otherwise you'll get a warning light on the dash and all sorts of things will happen. So you've got to be very, very careful where you hang that. As you can see, I'm seeing where it's going to hang. Take the top nut out now, and the whole arm should come right out, whole hub. Now we're going to put this in a vise. Be very, very careful of the lug nuts that you don't damage the lug nuts. We're going to undo that dust cap. Pop that in there. As you tighten the vise up, tighten it up using the lug nuts, but don't damage it. Safety glasses, hammer and a flat screwdriver, and we're just going to try and get underneath that cap, just like you would with a can of paint. Fairly quickly and easily. Comes. Now you can see our nut in there. Now the nut has an indent punched into it, so that to prevent it from coming off, we have to knock that indent out a little bit, and then we'll undo the nut using the air rattle gun and our chip obs. next thing to come out is the rotor for the ABS. We'll flip it over, and we just have to undo that shield that's on there. Dust shield, I suppose they call it. With a 10mm spanner. There's 4 bolts there. Just going to loosen that like so. Turn him over, and now we've got to separate that arm from the shaft. So to do that, we're going to use a manual gear puller. Pop that onto the arm. It's brand new, I just tweaked these up a little bit. Now I used a torch here because I had it handy, just to heat it up to see if we can get it out a little bit more easily. You don't have to do this, you can skip this step, but I did it anyway. And with the rattle gun, slowly but surely, up she comes. Now you notice I'm keeping my body as far away as I can from that, just in case something goes wrong. And I've also still got my safety glasses on. And off it comes. Now that part of the bearing will have to come off. We'll tackle that in a minute. Right now we're going to tackle this seal here. I took a while to do this actually. Don't have to be too delicate with it. I'm just trying to get it ready so that I can get the hammer and the screwdriver in there. Here we go. In there, should collapse on itself and easily pop out. You just got to be careful you don't damage the inside of the hub there. Right, now there's a circlip, so we'll grab our circlip pliers and pull the circlip out. Part of the bearing, and we pull those inner bearing races out, like so. And now we can get to the fun stuff with the shop press. So we find the correct tools there for the press to press against. Trusty new small press, it's a 12-ton press, and then go about pressing it. If you haven't used a press before, just go slow, line it up. Very short time, you'll find it'll pop the main part of the bearing out. And there you have it. There's the bearing. Now we have to tackle the piece that's still left on the shaft. What I used was a Dremel. You can actually use an air tool, air grinder if you like. The Dremel there. Now I'd never done this before. I had seen it done on the internet, and I was very concerned that I was perhaps going to get through to that shaft and damage the shaft. So I went very, very slowly and made numerous cuts, trying to avoid going too low through that bearing. But eventually I cut through. Unfortunately, my camera ran out of memory just at the crucial moment where we ting. But we haven't got that capture on here, but you can imagine what happens is with the tension, once you get through, break through and almost get through, and it'll just go bing and it'll just slide off. You could use a puller on that as well, but I decided to use the drill. Once that was off, I then got busy with the black paint and painted the arm and part. Okay, now we're ready to reinstall everything. So the first thing to do is I greased up the center there. And as I said before, very important to line everything up perfectly. Don't go too quickly once you start pressing the press down. There's only a small press, but still 12 tons of pressure. So you've got to make sure it's all lined up nicely. Set it in there. Also be careful with the bearings, because those inner pieces will fall out if you're not careful. You don't want to drop them on the concrete and chip them. Okay, so now we have one bearing in. And we need to put the circlip back in. There's a groove in there where the circlip goes, so it's quite easy to locate. Now we flip it over. And we're going to install the seal. Now I didn't have a tool that was big enough to actually get the seal all in one go. So what I decided to do was tap it in with a hammer, just very carefully. If you're going to do this, you've got to be very, very careful with it. Make sure you don't damage it as it goes in. It's very important to line it up. And just tap one side then the other. So as you tap one side, the other side will come up, and you keep repeating that until it starts going in. Just got to be very patient, very delicate with the hammer. And once you get down to that point, as you tap around, the hammer starts to hit the edge, and you can hear when it's actually flush. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and put this together. Now, at this point, I forgot to put the greasing it up. At this point, I forgot to put the shield in there. So later, you'll see me cutting the shield. You are supposed to put the shield in at this point in time to together with that part. Now you have to be very, very careful in this because you haven't got the top piece of that bearing, and your balance has to be very good. You have to hold that arm steady as you're pressing so that it goes in nice and straight. So it's a bit of a balancing act to begin with, especially, but again, take your time and you'll get there. Just line everything up. Now I actually misjudged the length of that I'd set the press at. I still had about 15 mil or 10 millimeters to go, so at this point I actually had to pull everything down, lift up the bottom section just to get that little bit extra down in place. So most of the bearings in, we just have to put that other part of the bearing in. As you can see, without that, it's still not sturdy. So using a piece of cut water pipe there, another piece, I'm going to press that piece in. Right, we're almost ready to go. All we really need to do now is put the ABS rotor in. Do up the bolt, but I didn't have a torque wrench there. I had to do that at work, which I'll show you in a moment. But it was about this time I realised that I hadn't put the heat shield back on when I should have in that last step. So I got my trusty Dremel out again and just cut in the center part there so I could fit it back around. As you can see, that's a circle there, so you can't put it back on once the other stuff's together. So anyway, I just cut that there, and then I could slide it back around into position. And while we're here, I thought I'd clean the surface. It's where your brake rotor sits. It's supposed to be quite smooth without any rust. Cut it back. And very nice and clean. because I'm a clean freak. And then the shield goes back on with the 10mm bolts there. And then of course, once you have torqued the nut down, you have to knock that part of the nut back in so that it doesn't come off at all. It's just a safety precaution, and then you pop that dust cap back on. But at this point in time, after giving it a little bit more of a spray of black paint, I then left it overnight and took it into work the next day to then torque it up to 200 Newton meters. Actually, 200 Newton meters. I'm not sure what that is in foot pounds. And so that's the part you have to indent after you've torqued it up. So the bench at work, I discovered, wasn't the strongest structure in the world, as you're about to see. I think I almost broke it. Trying to torque this down to 200 Newton meters. But as I say, once that's done and you indent that nut, pop the cap back on, and then you can install it back onto the vehicle. All done. Thank you for watching.